Leviticus chapter 4 describes the various offerings that needed to be offered, but specifically the sin offerings. So it describes to us, the things that needed to be offered. So if somebody sins, they have to give a certain offering, bring that offering to the to the tabernacle, and through a certain process, their sins would be forgiven. Leviticus 5 also speaks about the same thing. But if I can just describe this to you, this transferring of the sin of a person's sin, what would happen is the person who would sin would now bring an animal to the sanctuary, and they would lay their hands on the sanctuary, on this animal, and by so doing, they would confess their sins, and their sin now would be transferred to this animal. And what would happen is they would kill that animal, and the priest would take that blood, and he would take some of that blood, and he would just put that blood on the altar of burnt sacrifice. They would also sacrifice this animal as well, and by so doing, the person's sin would now be transferred to the animal and to the animal's blood. But now, when the priest ate of this animal, the priest would now eat of this animal. The Bible says a few times, it says that the priest will make an atonement. And if we look at Leviticus 10 verse 17, it tells us in verse 17, it says, "Wherefore, God was a bit angry with some of his priests, and he tells them that you guys were supposed to be eating of this offering." It says in verse 17, "Wherefore have ye not eaten the sin offering in the holy place, seeing it is most holy, and God hath given it to you to bear the iniquity of the congregation, to make atonement for them before the Lord." So the Bible tells us that when this priest now would eat of the offering, they would be making atonement for the person, and it says that they would bear the iniquity of the person. Okay, so what would happen is the person would sacrifice the animal, or would lay their hands on the animal, transferring their sin to the animal, and then the priest would take of this blood, put it on the altar, and then we also sacrifice the animal and eat of that animal. And so the sins would be transferred from the person to the animal to the priest. But then also the priest would also make a sacrifice for his own sins. And now his own sins not only included his personal sins, but included the sins of this person to whom, whose sins had now been transferred to him. So then the priest would now offer a sacrifice. He would lay his hands on an animal, and he would take the blood, and he would sprinkle that blood. He would take that blood and sprinkle that blood on the curtain separating the holy place from the most holy place inside the tent of the sanctuary. Okay, so that would mean then that his sins now would be transferred to the sanctuary. So once again, that process from the person to the animal, from the animal to the priest, and then from the priest to the sanctuary. And so all the sins of the entire congregation of Israel would be transferred to the sanctuary. But then once every year, there was a day known as the cleansing of the sanctuary, or the Day of Atonement. And on this day, all these sins now would be transferred from the sanctuary to Satan, or to a goat or an animal representing Satan. And so, so over an entire year, all the sins, that would accumulate in the sanctuary, metaphorically speaking, all these sins would be transferred to the sanctuary. Then once a year, the sanctuary would be cleansed, metaphorically, of the sins, and these sins would be taken and put onto an animal representing Satan. And then this animal would be taken into a wilderness, into a place there were no people there, and would be basically left abandoned and left to die. And so all the sins would now be taken from the sanctuary, from the entire congregation of Israel, placed onto Satan, and gotten rid of.